Right, so I didn't necessarily ever think I'd make a video on this subject, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and so it's time to talk about modes and maybe talk about how I think people are sort of missing the point of modes, and how, first of all, I wouldn't think about them, and then secondly, when I think it is appropriate to think about things modally. So probably if you play guitar, modes will have come up, because in the guitar world particularly, it's one of these subjects that gets thrown around a bit more than I think it does in other areas, and I think that's to do with the way that the guitar has kind of many places to play the same thing. So for example, our C major scale, we can also play it in a completely different part of the neck. And naturally, if we would start it from the lowest point to the highest point on a string, you'd be starting it on a different note. So I think this is where there's this kind of, what's the word? Parity or equivalence, that if we start a C major down here on a G, we are playing G Mixolydian, or, you know, that's, I think, the way that people start to think about this stuff. So people often in some of my videos will ask, what mode are you using, or what scales are you using? 99 times out of 100, I'm just using the major scale. I don't really think in modes too much, except for in certain circumstances. So let me explain what I mean when I say I think people are applying the analysis of modes in a place where it's not necessarily appropriate or easiest to do so. So for instance, if we take a common chord progression, say like a 1-6, 4, or something like that. So we got a C major, an A minor, 6, and then a 4, an F. Now there's a few layers of analysis that you could apply to this. So you could say, okay, this is very much staying diatonic. So when we say diatonic and non-diatonic, we mean, does this all belong in one key? So C major belongs in C major, A minor belongs in C major, and F belongs in C major. So this is a diatonic chord progression, and therefore, me personally, I wouldn't apply modal analysis to it. But you do see people on forums talk about this sort of stuff. So they might say, over the C, I'm playing C Ionian. Over the A minor, I'm playing A Aeolian. And over the F, I'm playing F Lydian. Now, for those of you who have some knowledge of this stuff, you might have already recognized that those are all the same scale, and they're all C major. And so for me, that's why I wouldn't apply that analysis. Now you might get other people that might say, okay, over the C, I'm going to play C Lydian. Over the A minor, and then over the F, I'm going to play F Lydian. And then back to the C, C Lydian. But what you then have is something that is no longer all in the same key, if that makes sense. Because what I've done there is I've jumped between lots of different keys. So what I actually think about when I'm playing guitar is where the home is, or the key center. So through all of my jazz playing, or all of my rock or fusion playing, I'm always trying to keep a close eye on where is home for what I'm playing. And what that means is that if I'm playing a progression, I'm still trying to keep a sense of where is home for each part there. So for the F, in C, D minor, still in C major. For this B flat, this non-diatonic, I'm in F then, and then I come back to F, which is the 4 of C. So then I'm back at home in C. So if I was to solo over that, let's just do it a second. So F. So I'm being careful to make sure that I am keeping a close eye on where is home for each chord. So the F has a home in C major, the D minor has a home which is in C major, the B flat, its home is elsewhere. That is not from this same community of chords. This is a diverse chord from another area, and this area happens to be F major. F major is the home for this flavour of B flat. And then I can come back to the F, which is returning to somewhere in the same community. And if I was to resolve the whole thing, I'd come back to home, which is 1, chord 1, which is C major for this progression. So that might sound a bit confusing at first, but what you really need to keep in mind for all of this stuff is that a lot of our Western music is based around the idea of these cadences where things resolve to land at home. So this is where the idea of kind of tension in playing, tension release come from. You're trying to take things away from home. And then know where home is and land at home. And that's kind of getting a handle on what is diatonic and what is not. So if we're going to then talk about where applying modes does make sense, there are kind of two areas for me. So one is where you've got kind of a static root note perhaps. So at the opening there, I've got this C, which is the drone. Now what I'm going to do is try to make that C sound like it's a different degree of the scale. So if I want to make the C sound like it's the first degree of the scale, I play in C Ionian, C major, the scale that probably most of us know. And there's home. If I want to make it sound like C Dorian, I'm going to treat the C as the second degree of the scale, and that means that I'm going to effectively be playing in B flat major. So my home, if I'm playing in C Dorian, actually feels like B flat, if I've got control of it properly, yeah? If I want to treat the C as the third degree of the scale, I'm going to then be playing in C Phrygian, where home is going to feel like A flat. So let's try this. Here we go. So C Phrygian, home will kind of feel like A flat if we've got control of it. C Lydian, this will probably be one of the most familiar kind of sounds when you're talking about modes. We want to make the C feel like it's the 4th degree of the scale, so give me a second. So C Lydian, home will feel like it's a G. And you should have like an inherent tension because that 4 feels like it's away from the G, but... Now C Mixolydian, or trying to make the C feel like it's the 5th degree of the scale. C Mixolydian, so it's going to feel like home is F. Okay, so now let's do C as the 6th degree of the scale. You probably guessed it, it's going to sound like, it's going to be C Aeolian, which sounds like C minor. It's going to sound like E flat major will be home. Okay, now next is the weirdest of all. We're going to try and make it sound like C is the 7th degree of the scale. And what that means is we're going to effectively be playing in D flat major. D flat major will sound like home. So hopefully that kind of starts to make sense as to where the idea of modal analysis does start to make sense. It's not when stuff is all staying in the same key. It's more about moving homes around a sort of other idea. Now, the other place where it makes sense to do this is in chord progressions that people like Alan Holdsworth use, where you might only have one chord from each sort of, I was talking about sort of communities or key centers. You might have like this kind of chord. So this is like a G sharp 11, which if you do the analysis of, it has a home which is D major. So just to demonstrate. And then we might modulate to this kind of a thing, a minor third up. So here we've got a B flat sharp 11, and the home for this is obviously not going to be D major, it's actually going to be an F major. So, for instance, if you were going between this G sharp 11, we play in G Lydian to B flat Lydian. So that's an area where it does kind of make sense to start thinking about modal analysis. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. This is kind of me opening up this kind of Pandora's box to talk about modes of the modes of the major scale, and to see if we can start to get a handle on why we might want to talk about this. And the next stage is probably I'm going to drop up a backing track. The goal with this modal stuff is to try and make that note which you're playing sound like it's another degree of the scale other than 1, if that makes sense. So see if you can get your head around that a little bit and try it. Thank you for watching. If you want to like and subscribe, that'd be really cool. Cheers.